And in my opinion and in my experience, there's nobody that's more in tune with their customers than the exhibitors.
This is the Box Office Podcast. I'm Daniel Loria, the editorial director of Box Office Pro, the pulse of theatrical exhibition. Here this week with my colleague Chad Kennerk from Box Office Pro. And in this week's feature segment, we're talking to Kevin Mitchell, the head and one of the co-founders of Showbiz Direct, a new theatrical exhibition company that is coming out with their first movie this weekend, Reagan, starring Dennis Quaid, the biopic of the former president, hitting a theater near you. They're a very ambitious bunch, our friends over at Showbiz Direct, looking and adding more screens by the day here leading up to the release this weekend. We will be going over Kevin Mitchell's transition from the exhibition side of the industry to the distribution side of the industry and what he has in store with this launch of Reagan and more movies coming up from Showbiz Direct, a really cool initiative to bring the creative community closer to exhibitors around the country. That's coming up on the second half of the episode. But before that, we've got news, we've got box office, we've got a low forecast for Labor Day weekend. I don't know how else to put it, Chad. It doesn't look great this weekend.
No, it doesn't. Hopefully people will come out and catch up with some things they've missed in the last month or two.
We're expecting a big drop-off from last year's Labor Day weekend. We had The Equalizer 3 open to around 42 million over the entire holiday weekend frame. This year, however, no big new openers from any studios. I think maybe the one with the widest footprint is going to be Afraid, the AI Blumhouse horror thriller that's coming out. Probably going to have the biggest Showtime market share from what we're tracking here. But unfortunately, it's going to be maybe $50 million plus for the entire top 10 over the regular 3-day frame this holiday weekend. No big new opener. A couple of smaller movies that I think are trying to come in and make an impact. I mentioned Reagan. We've got 1992, a drama coming out from Lionsgate set during the LA riots era of the early 90s. And we've also got a film from Bleecker Street with Casey Affleck, a sci-fi thriller called Slingshot. They're all going to be vying for screens here, but one of the big reasons, I think, that we're not going to be seeing a big opening weekend or a very competitive Labor Day weekend frame is that Beetlejuice tracking, Chad. This thing is just going up, and up. Have you been seeing a lot of marketing for this movie on your end? I know you're already collecting some of the merchandising items that the circuits are going to be rolling out. We'll have that article up next week.
Yeah, there's some really cool ones coming out. I'm excited for that. I'm excited for this film. I definitely have been seeing a lot of marketing. They're doing a lot of push on the cast interviews on social media. They had the premiere in Mexico already, so there was a lot of coverage of that. Yeah, I think we talked at CinemaCon about how that was the big one coming out of Warner Brothers.
Coming out from Warner Brothers, that's right. We're expecting an opening weekend between 100 million and 140 million. I know, a big range. We'll have that a lot tighter by the time you guys get our final forecast, not this Thursday, but next Thursday, before release for Beetlejuice. We expect this sequel from Tim Burton and Warner Brothers to be the anchor of the September box office. A box office that by the end of August will already be past the $2 billion mark for Q3. Good milestone, the biggest quarter so far this year as we continue to recover from the pandemic. Where this quarter will end, I think it's not unfair to say that Q3 is going to probably finish out along the lines of Q3 2023. That did $2.65 billion domestically. That's more or less our target this year. So the recovery, I think, is now on pace. And of course, we expect Q4 to be well above the 1.85 Q4 that we had in 2023, primarily because there's no actor or writer strikes. There's going to be, I think, a much healthier slate of films. I think a more exciting set of marketing tools that studios are going to be able to employ and activate. So it's going to be a good end to the year. Unfortunately, this is going to be a typical slow, late August weekend, a slower than we'd like Labor Day weekend. But that doesn't mean there's no good movies coming out. You can hear a lot more about Reagan which is one of those new openers in the second half of this episode. But let's go over some news, Chad, because we've got a couple of headlines and we need to catch up on. Let's start in terms of new cinema technology that's making its way out there. We've got a great announcement here from our friends over at Barco that their new HDR projection technology is going to be finally rolling out with a major Hollywood release.
Yeah, they announced the first locations in select cities on September 20th with the release of Transformers 1. So this is in partnership with AMC, B&B, and Regal. And these HDR installations are going to offer moviegoers in LA, New York, Dallas, Miami, and Kansas City a chance to be the first to experience this technology, which is based on the company's light steering technology.
Yeah, I think one of the more exciting bits of cinema technology that we've seen this year from one of the major projection partners that we have in the industry. You mentioned Regal as one of those circuit partners that are coming in. We've got another news bit here from Fandango actually expanding its agreement with Regal in terms of online ticketing and also adding a couple of new offerings. You wrote up this story earlier this week, Chad. What can Regal customers expect from that Fandango partnership coming soon?
Yeah, so moviegoers will be able to pre-order concessions through Fandango's mobile app, which is a great ad there. And then also Fandango and Regal will be working together to offer exclusive movie ticket collectible bundles. We saw a few of those with, I think Despicable Me had like a t-shirt ticket combo. So that's another kind of opportunity there for fans to get some merch related to their favorite franchises and characters.
It's good to see Regal strike up these partnerships, get itself out there. A big rebound year for Regal as well, following the emergence from the bankruptcy of 2023. In terms of other major circuit news, our friends over at B&B Theaters, who are celebrating their centennial anniversary this year, they're going to be honored at ShowEast 2024, the event over in Miami, Florida, in a special final night awards ceremony on October 24th. That's on the Thursday of the event. They'll be honored with the Dan Fellman Show E Award. So it'll be great to see the family owned and operated circuit receive this award and just extend those centennial celebrations in Miami with us this fall. So that's coming up in October. On a bit of more recent news, over in the Northeast, Showcase Cinemas, announcing the promotion of Rebecca Stein to Senior Vice President of Marketing and Partnerships, a big friend of Box Office and the podcast. We've worked with Rebecca for many years here, so a great congratulations to her. It's great to see this promotion, which I think was already in place for a little bit. It was great to see it formally announced. We ran that notice over on our website, boxofficepro.com, where you can find all the updates to the world of theatrical exhibition. And I think that pretty much makes up the entire news segment this week, Chad. A quick one for us, but stay tuned because after the break, we've got an interview with Kevin Mitchell, one of the co-founders from Showbiz Direct, talking a little bit more about the Reagan movie that had one of its pre-opening screenings over at CineShow in Dallas, Texas earlier this week. It'll hit theaters near you on Friday. Kevin and I sit down to talk about his career in exhibition and why he wanted to expand everything that he's done in his career to the world of theatrical distribution. That is coming up after the break.
Celebrating its 20th anniversary this year, Fathom continues to be the recognized leader in specialty distribution and alternative content, bringing theaters a wide array of highly anticipated titles from around the world. Fathom's slate includes live concert performances from the Metropolitan Opera Live in HD series, special live events like Andrea Bocelli 30, a celebration, and the Canelo vs. Berlanga boxing match, and ongoing series, Fathom's Big Screen Classics and Studio Ghibli Fest, introducing beloved films to new audiences throughout the year. Fathom also offers faith-based content like God's Not Dead, In God We Trust, the top-selling Jesus Thirsts, The Miracle of the Eucharist, and The Chosen, which Fathom brought to screens before fans could see it anywhere else.
Fathom has partnerships with the top studios and is currently working with Leica to celebrate the 15th anniversary presentation of Coraline in remastered 3D, and with Warner Brothers on the upcoming documentary Superman: The Christopher Reeve Story, a huge hit at Sundance earlier this year. Fathom, bringing unique content your guests will love year-round. Go to fathomevents.com for more details.
And we're back here on the Boxoffice Podcast with Kevin Mitchell from Showbiz Direct, an exhibition veteran, now playing with the rival softball team here. Kevin, but it's okay. It's a little bit of a bridge instead of a jump, let's call it, now that you're working here on the distribution side and representing distribution with Showbiz Direct, a really cool concept that we will get into a little bit. But Kevin, welcome to the podcast. I want to get started with just some of your background here on exhibition. I think a lot of folks recognize the Mitchell name here in the US, but for our international listeners, how did you grow up in this industry? What's your background with movie theaters?
Sure. So Daniel, first of all, just tell you that the way you started that was interesting, but as an exhibitor at heart, I completely get it. So to that end, I literally grew up in the exhibition industry, tearing tickets and sweeping floors. I worked my way up through Cinemark. My family started Cinemark. My dad was the CEO and chairman until he retired, and I stayed on with Cinemark for a little over 20 years. And then I left Cinemark shortly after we went public and started my own company, Showbiz Cinemas. And then we were doing very well. We operated in several states, and we were doing very well until the whole world shut down. And then, we weathered that storm, came back, and then I got an offer from somebody to buy me out. But the timing was good because in the meantime, I was thinking in the back of my head that we need to come up with a way to create more product and the pipeline for product. And so I worked out a deal to sell Showbiz Cinemas, and then I rotated on the distribution side of the fence and started putting together Showbiz Direct. The reason we named the company Showbiz Direct was because as an exhibitor, I always felt like that we were being roadblocked between the creative community. And so the purpose of Showbiz Direct is twofold. Number one, to create a steady form, a steady stream rather of a product for the pipeline. The major studios, the Paramounts and the Disneys and so forth, the Sonys, they're focusing on these tentpole pictures with these huge budgets. And so that means they're focusing really on the Christmas and the summer seasons. Meanwhile, there's 12 months in a year. And so we were looking to fill that void. And so that's the main reason of starting Showbiz Direct was to create that steady flow of product. But the other reason is to close that gap between the creative community and the exhibition community. And I feel like we're doing that with Reagan.
I want to get into that because I started picking up on that on LinkedIn. I saw some posts over at Cinemark, at AMC, at B&B Theaters. You actually went with the star of Reagan, Dennis Quaid, and you just went directly to the source, directly to the headquarters of exhibition groups, just to sit down and say, hey, this is my film, this is our star, and we're really excited to bring it to your theaters. I love that grassroots direct approach. No middlemen here in your approach.
Yeah, no, that's right. And in my opinion and in my experience, there's nobody that's more in tune with their customers than the exhibitors. Certainly not, not in Hollywood. You've got theater circuits based in Kansas City that certainly know more about their customer base than they do in West Hollywood, right? And
Right.
So I think that's important. But it's also important to understand, listen, we're a partner. We're not a make-believe partner. We're an actual partner. And our goals and our interests are aligned. And I think if we work together, then we can accomplish those goals.
And it's something I've heard from a lot of filmmakers, a lot of actors every time we get to interview them, Kevin. The fact that they feel there's this sort of invisible boundary in the middle of them connecting directly with movie theaters. There always, has to be a score of publicists, a score of executives left and right. that make it very inaccessible to have these very simple conversations and find some synergies in, as you say it, making sure that Kansas City can market to Kansas City, right? Rather than having to take everything from New York and LA, all the cues. This is a national marketing conversation, and the opportunity to be able to connect directly with folks, I think, is so important in that. I want to talk a little bit more about the Showbiz Direct makeup here, because it's not just yourself, right? This isn't something that you said, all right, I got this idea, I'm going at it alone. You've got some great veterans in the industry here with you. Some names that we recognize here, both Richie Faye, both on the exhibition and distribution side, and Scott Kennedy, obviously someone that we know have helped bring a lot of films over theatrically. Talk to me about that trio here that you've got of executives leading the charge for Showbiz.
Well, I will tell you, I learned a long time ago lessons from Dad and others in the industry. The secret to success is surrounding yourself with people that are smarter than you and better than you. And so I feel like I've done that with Richie and Scott. For those of you out there that don't know or are not familiar with Richie, has been an exhibitor and a distributor. He worked for AMC for a long time. He worked for Columbia and Sony. I don't know if it was Columbia. It might have been TriStar, but he worked for the studio side. And then he was working for a startup company called Summit at the time. And there was a book that was being peddled all over Hollywood, and nobody would touch it. And this guy, Richie Faye, took this book and really, really focused on that book and went to bat for it and said, we should do this. There's something special here. And so with Richie pushing it, the newly formed studio took a risk and a leap of faith and turned it into a $1 billion franchise. That book was Twilight. And then shortly after that, Summit was acquired by Lionsgate, and then they did the same thing with Hunger Games. And so certainly he's a qualified veteran and nobody better than to help jumpstart Showbiz Direct.
And that's the ambition here, Kevin. And I want to highlight this. You guys are coming in here not with niche programming, not with movies that might appeal to one corner of the audience. You guys are coming here swinging for the fences. You guys are here with a true ambition to make cross-quadrant films that you can really grow to be top 10, top 20 earners at the box office.
That's right. I want to be careful in what I say because we've got, we're looking at whatever makes sense for exhibition and the company. And so Reagan is a wide release. We're also looking at some limited releases there that make sense, but and then we've got some big pictures that we're looking at too. And unfortunately, I can't talk about those just yet. But we're looking at all sorts of movies. And everybody seems to think that we're focused on, conservative movies or we're focused on faith-based movies. And that's not the case. We're focused on creating a pipeline of movies that make sense.
Yeah. And you can see that with the involvement of your other partner here, Scott Kennedy, getting involved into the fold. We went into some of Richie's background. What can you tell us about Scott? Because it's also a great background of bringing in big ticket movies to theaters.
And Scott is our cheerleader, and he's our rah-rah guy of the we sure appreciate that. And so those of you that know Scott will know exactly what I'm talking about. But Scott's an experienced veteran too. In fact, Scott and I grew up in the business together. His dad and my dad used to do business together. And he's just a rock star. And I'll tell you that he spent time at Global Road. He spent time with the Weinstein. He did very specialized movies, and he did very wide release movies and award-winning movies. And so Scott is no walk in the park either. He knows his stuff. He's a seasoned vet.
Yeah, it's an exciting team you have here. And we've talked about Reagan, and it's a project that I think is going to come at an interesting time on the schedule. Of course, it's election season, and there's always that divisiveness that happens during this period because, of course, you've got two rival parties coming at it. But the way you're marketing this, you're not really buying into that trend, right? You're really trying to step away from that mess and just making this about a movie about a man who was a huge influence in Hollywood and then went on to leave the country in 2 presidential terms. Can you tell me about that approach in marketing this movie? Because it's very easy to say, we've only got half the country. let's forget about the other half. That's not what you're doing here.
No, not at all. And I'll tell you, is the timing may seem like it's a politically motivated movie, but it's really not. The movie itself is about it's a love story, really. It's about a man, a great man, who was an actor and became the president of the SAG and the unions there and helped navigate their own strikes and that, which is really relevant today. And then also to become a great political figure. He was the governor of California and then became the president. But the movie itself follows him from a child all the way up to his passing. And it talks about, how he got into politics. It talks about his acting career. And it talks about, as a young boy, he was a lifeguard and how he read the rivers and then later became capable of reading people the same way he used to read the currents as a lifeguard. And so it's very interesting. I'm kind of stuttering and hemming and hawing a little bit because I don't want to give away the movie, but it's really interesting. It's certainly not a political movie, although Reagan was a prominent political figure. By the way, and he was liked by both sides of the fence. He was a Democrat before he was a Republican. And so I would say he was a master at bringing people together for the greater good of the country.
In our little corner of the universe, do you have a favorite Ronald Reagan performance in a film?
I don't. Reagan was, when he was acting, that was a little before my time, right? And so, in fact, when he was president, I'm talking to a lot of my colleagues and a lot of people in the industry, and I've heard a lot that Reagan was the first president they voted for. And so I wasn't old enough to vote when Reagan was elected. And so I really don't. I've seen some clips and stuff of him and his Westerns and stuff, but it was really before my time, unfortunately.
I got to give you a tip here. Go back, 1964, Don Siegel, one of my favorite directors. Reagan goes against type and plays the villain in a movie called The Killers. It's based on an Ernest Hemingway short story. Amazing. He's terrific in it. And he's really mean. I mean, in a way that you hadn't seen Ronald Reagan before. Really interesting film to see it. That's my, go back to the vault, check that movie out.
For sure.
So that movie's coming out, as you mentioned, August 30th. But the marketing campaign has really gone underway. And you mentioned that grassroots effort, going out to exhibition, going out to the headquarters, meeting everyone with Dennis Quaid, who's playing the lead in the film. Can you tell us about some of the other sort of marketing efforts that you guys have done to reach out to folks? This
has been interesting. In this case, the producers are acting as our marketing team. And they've really done a good job with it. In fact, I was in LA last week, and we did a screening at the Reagan Library with a lot of their donors and stuff. And we had Dennis there with some of the other cast members, and we've got a lot of things planned. We've been doing some of the couches. Dennis has been doing, he's been traveling the country, working very hard, on the talk shows and stuff, but he's also been working on a lot of the podcasts.
No, I think that's a very smart approach because it was really easy. Let's say, no, I'm not even going to call it easy. I'm going to call it lazy. The lazy thing would have been, like I mentioned earlier, you know what? It's about a Republican president. It's an election year. Let's just go for the core base here. Let's sell the tickets that we know we're selling and call it a day. And I love that that's really just not been your approach at all in making sure you get the word out for this movie and really get exhibition involved as a central partner in making this film a success.
Yeah, and we've been doing a lot of screenings for prominent individuals that want to teach younger people that may not be familiar with Reagan, want to teach them about Reagan. And so we've been going out and doing some screenings, and we've been, asking that people step up and do auditorium rentals and invite their friends and invite their, people that may be mentoring or something like that to teach them about Reagan. So it's very much been a boots on the ground campaign there. I'll tell you something that we've got coming up is we're going to be in NASCAR.
Nice.
We're going to be in Daytona. We've got a Reagan car. Dennis is going to be the Grand Marshal. And the fan zone, the Reagan. We've got a Reagan stage where they do all the interviews. We're going to be running a couple of spots, not only at the racetrack on a constant loop, but then we're also running a couple of spots that'll be televised during the race as well.
Fantastic. No, I think those outreach efforts are always important. Making sure that you're not only putting out the movie, that you're marketing it the right way. I'm sure as an exhibitor, all those frustrations you had when you had movies come your way and you're like, oh man, I wish that the studio would do this. I wish the distributor was there. Now you get to do it, and you get to pay for it too, Kevin. So now all your studio colleagues get to say, I told you so.
That's it. And it does. And I think you hit the nail on the head. As I took on this adventure, I started thinking about what was it? Well, how can we do things better? But it starts with the product, right? It's not the same old franchise stuff. While those are very important to the industry, it's, they're not real creative. And so we're trying to bring back something other than superhero movies. We're really just focused on entertainment. And whether that entertainment is some educational type of movie or history-based or just fun. And for us, it's just about creating an escape and entertainment, even for a couple of hours. And so that was our goal. And so that's where it starts. And then the other part of that, we touched on it earlier, is let's visit with our theater partners and let's truly be partners. But a partnership is a two-way street. And I think we're seeing that out of our exhibitor partners. For example, when you had mentioned that when we toured around with Dennis to the theater circuits, to a handful of theater circuits, we spent time with their marketing departments and we recorded some stuff for their social media and things like that to reach their movie club members or whatever. Everybody's got their own, right? And then we also talked about what we're doing from a grassroots campaign. And so it's all about trying to reach the target audience there, right?
Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to see the results of all that work, of all that effort. More movies coming out from Showbiz Direct Distribution. You can find those. What's your website so people know where to look for updates?
We have two. Probably the one for Reagan is reaganmovie.com.
Perfect.
And then, of course, you can always see some stuff on showbizdirectdistribution.com.
Fantastic. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for your time here on the Box Office Podcast. And that was Kevin Mitchell, co-founder of Showbiz Direct, speaking to us here on the Box Office Podcast. Earlier, you heard from my colleague, Chad Kennerk, and from myself, Daniel Loria. And on behalf of all of us, we'd like to thank you for once again listening to our show. New episodes come out every Thursday, and don't forget to subscribe because next week we've got the September box office preview with Romeo Duchenne going over the box office, and we will be going over what we find interesting on the release schedule in the month of September. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you again next week.